Hi, I'm Joanna.
And I'm Cynthia, and we welcome you to the Joy Podcast, a podcast about our creative journey of writing a cookbook together.
Since 2020, we became creative collaborators as we worked together towards the publication of our first cookbook, Joey Baking and Photographing Northern European Pastry.
Joanna is a designer and self-taught pastry chef. She's half British, half Dutch.
And Cynthia is the photographer and entrepreneur. She's originally from Panama.
We exchange ideas about the process and experience of publishing a cookbook, our cultural backgrounds, our creative passions, and more.
And we want to inspire you to pursue your own creative journey. Today we'll be chatting about the inception of our cookbook and the journey that we embarked on when we decided to get published.
Hi, Joanna.
Hi,
Long
Cynthia.
time coming. We finally made it to record our first podcast, and I'm very excited to share our story here today.
Yep, me too.
Excellent. So why don't we take our listeners to how everything started? What was the actual inception of our book? And I think we have to give them a little bit of background as to how we met.
Yes, because we started off as friends before we started off as creative collaborators.
Right.
So
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I moved to California in 2014. And that's where I met Cynthia because she was married to, at the time, my husband's boss. And so I didn't know anybody in California. Cynthia was the first person basically that I met. And that was, or she was the one who introduced me to living in the Bay Area.
Right. Do you remember the first day we met?
Probably not, no. Do you?
I do. I actually do, yes.
Okay.
So just for a little bit, for a little bit of context, I actually moved to, I lived in the Netherlands for a whole year. And when we moved to the Bay Area from the Netherlands, then Joanna's husband took over for the operation of that office. And when I first moved to the Bay Area, I remember it was September of 2006. And shortly after, a few weeks after, we had, I guess it was Thanksgiving time. And I remember my first Thanksgiving in the US, we actually went to Denny's because I really wanted to have turkey and we really didn't have any friends. We had just moved here. We didn't know very many people at all. We're starting a brand new life. So when Joanna, years later moved to the Bay Area, I remember she was pregnant. I made it a point to host Thanksgiving dinners where I would just invite people that didn't have any friends or family in town. So I remember inviting her over. She came over and she had a little tiny baby bump. I remember clearly that day that we met. So anyways, so that's a little bit of context of how we started our friendship. I think she came over.
It was much appreciated. I think pretty much every other visit I had with you always had something to do with food. Whether it was trying Panamanian food or me bringing a cake or something like that, or Thanksgiving or Easter or those kinds of things. So it was always fun.
My favorite actually was when you brought some bread for an Easter and all the eggs, like deviled eggs with all the flavors. That was so fun. Anyways, good times.
We spent a lot of time talking about food.
Yes, that is true. So, we live kind of close by. We frequented each other somewhat. She started her own family. I had my family. We were busy ourselves, but we always found time to, intersect and kind of checking in with each other. I remember that. I would see, she had this interest in developing or, creating an at-home bakery. I remember that, and I remember you telling me that's what I really want to do. I remember having those conversations, at some point you started going to San Francisco to get trained on some, I forget.
Remember? That was the San Francisco Baking Institute, which was really cool. It was kind of the time where actually when I went to the San Francisco Baking Institute, I just had two small children. But really baking was kind of the escape from being mother all the time, right? It's just having something for myself, something creative for me to do. So when I went to San Francisco Baking Institute, that was fun. I was breastfeeding my youngest at the time, and it was a challenge to get it done logistically. But it was really the starting point for me to think, okay, what can I do? Can I build a business around baking, around making pastries, and starting to come up with ideas of what that could look like. And I forgot to mention earlier, when I moved to California, I moved from the Netherlands as well. That's where I originally come from. So that was sort of one of the starting points for me to think about my business. And what I decided at that point was, hey, wouldn't it be cool if I could start baking pastries from my childhood, right? From my youth, from where I lived in the Netherlands, but also because I was born in Norway, lived in Sweden for a little while. I'm half British. Obviously, all these countries are close to Belgium and Germany, and all this sort of that general Northern European area was important for my youth. And they all have wonderful pastries and wonderful traditions around pastry. And that's what I thought, hey, wouldn't it be awesome if I could bring that to the United States? So it took a few years from that first exploration at the San Francisco Baking Institute. But eventually, so sort of around the beginning of 2020, I had the beginnings of a at-home bakery where I was baking Northern European pastry and was really trying to bring the concept of fika, which we'll get into later, or the Northern European art of taking coffee and tea breaks and trying to bring that into American culture. Yes. Cynthia was also doing all kinds of creative things at the time, if you want to share.
Yeah, so at the time, I was a full-time stay-at-home mom, doing, the volunteering at the school, getting really involved with the community, leading little Cub Scout meetings. And I had a side, hobby / small business of family photography. And similarly to your experience with baking, photography was sort of my little escape, the one thing that would allow me to be my own person, the one thing in my life that allowed me to be very creative, because I'm not really crafty like you are. So I guess I'm creative when I'm cook, and I'm creative when I photograph. And up until that time, I started developing this beautiful family photography business. I got really established in the area where I live in Silicon Valley, Almaden Valley. And, through the school and connections, I not only created a beautiful community for myself, what I call today my village, that have, helped me raise my boys, but also got really well established in the space of photography here. And I remember looking at your Facebook posts, and I joined your little Facebook baking group, and you would create this beautiful pastry and I would follow. And there were times where, I was hosting a book club with my friends here in Almaden, and I was like, hey, can I buy some from you to have them try it? And every time we got together, I was just amazed of how skilled you were really as a pastry chef. And they were beyond it, like something that you buy, like a very expensive patisserie or something, beautiful pastry. And I remember towards the end of 2019, beginning of I guess it was at the end of 2019, I wanted to, at that time, I had gotten divorced. I got a corporate job in tech. But there was this little fire inside me. It's very hard to explain, but I wanted to experiment and try to diversify my business. And I reached out to you because you have such beautiful pastry, and you had a website, and you have all this social media presence. And I asked you, like, hey, would you let me take pictures for your web presence, and just so I could explore the world of branding photography? And I think that's where everything started. That was a true inception. If we were to pinpoint a date where everything started for this book, was that me reaching out to you and it's like, hey, would you be able? And of course, always as the supportive friend that you are.
We weren't even thinking about a book at that point. It was just supposed to be you taking some pictures and me getting some free visuals for my website. And like, oh, that's awesome. Yes, your photographs are much better than mine. So.
Yes, and I, quite frankly, at that point, I had never ever in my life photographed anything other than people. So I remember we went outside, I talked to my friend that had just remodeled her beautiful kitchen, and that was the perfect Canva for our photo shoot. She was so kind to support us also in this journey. And I went outside to take some headshots because that's what I'm comfortable with. And then you have all this beautiful pastry. And to this day, that photo shoot challenged me creatively. Like I never ever photograph things. Like I just, maybe the odd, I would second shoot for some weddings, do some flowers, but I never photograph pastry. So I went into that photo shoot thinking like, how can I keep myself, aligned to who I am as a photographer, which means, I am all about light. I only photograph with natural light. I remember we started the photo shoot around 2 p.m. on a winter day, which meant we only had available light for until like 4. And, natural light and emotion, like how can I make a pastry, convey emotion? And then when we started playing with that powder and, the powdered sugar over some, that was so beautiful. And I would never forget all the emotions I felt through taking those pictures that day. And I would never, diminish the meaning that photo shoot has taken me, like what a journey's taken me from there, to the day that today.
Pivotal moment.
So totally, like you never know what, things are going to play out for you from something that starts so little, but, it develops into, today, December 12th, 2022, I can call myself a food photographer thanks to that, right? And not only that, but I was like, I'm not trained yet. I've managed to do it, which means, and I think part of the what I say about in the book is, if I can do it, you can too. If I can photograph food, you can do it too. I can show you the simple ways I did it. You don't have to make it complicated. So anyways, so that was Inception that day. So beautiful.
And I remember when we were doing the photos, I don't know if it was on the actual day and you were showing me one of the photographs. I think you were showing me on your camera one of the photographs you took of me in the kitchen, and I was kind of had my arms crossed and like looking very suave in my baker's coat and feeling very professional. And I thought, I'm pretty sure I said, but correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure I said like, hey, this would be a great author picture in a cookbook. And we kind of giggled at it. And I think there was a couple more times throughout that day where the word cookbook came up, and that's kind of, it had never really, I mean, I've loved baking all my life. I'm a creative person. I have this thing for cookbooks. I collect them. I read them like a novel. But I think up until that point, I'd never really thought, hey, I could write a cookbook. That would be something I could do. So it was a pivotal moment for you. I think it was a pivotal moment for me as well, just to have that thought pop into my head. Like, hey, I could be a cookbook author. I could do that.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And we had a picture that would look awesome on the back of it.
Which, by the way, you'll be able to see it on the book as well. So
yeah.
Yes. So that was then. So what happens is that was January 2020, and then bang.
Yeah. The pandemic. Yeah. Which really sucked for my business because it was just starting to get going, and people it was very small, right? It's just people in my town that I knew were excited about the pastries that I was creating and were purchasing them from me every now and then. And I was just getting to the point where I was starting to market my business a little bit more and getting to people that I didn't know personally, which was exciting. But yeah, that was the end of that. At that point, it was really about focusing on staying safe and making sure that our kids could handle the remote learning situation that we were all thrown into. I did bake a lot of bread. I joined the sourdough baking trend of the beginning of the pandemic. I made a lot of bread. But yeah, there was very little social contact with other people and very little social contact between us as well. I think we took a look at those photos and thought, hey, this is great. And I stuck them on my website. And basically that was the end of any kind of social contact for a significant amount of time.
Yes, I remember. I went on to, I learned how to make Benedict eggs. I also went into my cooking pandemic phase for sure. And I remember having a group with some, like an album with some friends on iPhone where we just I think it was called Pandemic Cooking because we couldn't see each other. And we just shared what we cooked. I remember that, or share with my family in Panama. And that's, sharing through pictures became a theme. It really became a theme during that time. Yeah. And then
sharing in general was a challenge. So
it was.
I remember also when I was in my sourdough phase, one of the ladies in the town that I lived in, Morgan Hill, California, she's actually ended up being one of our taste testers. But for whatever reason, we were chatting on social media about something or other. And I mentioned to her that I had a live sourdough culture, and she's like, "Oh, can I have some?" I'm like, "Sure." So she dropped by my house one day and picked up a little baggie of sourdough. We never actually looked at each other or spoke to each other, but it was pandemic sharing, or that we couldn't get any flour. So I went and bought this giant 50-pound bag of bread flour for my sourdough extravaganza. And the same friend, she said like, "Hey, where'd you get your flour?" I was like, "You can have some of mine. I got 50 pounds of it." So I filled up a little bag of flour, stuck it on my front doorstep. I'm like, "Okay, come pick it up when you want." So it was very strange. It was a strange time.
It was a strange time, yes, but we made it. And I remember, well, at the time I was, working from home, doing the whole, online school thing that I'm sure many of the listeners went through as well. Like it was the time where everybody, went through the same thing, but not necessarily on the same way, not at the same level. Yeah. And towards the end of December 2020, a whole year later, once again, it's so interesting. And I think that I've learned now that I, think about it, listening to that little voice inside of you, the little spark of intuition, the little spark of wisdom that tells you to go for something. We just have to almost be quiet in our minds to be able to really tap into that little voice. Because, there was this little thing that told me, in the same way that I reach out to you to like, hey, let's do this branding shoot. That exact same voice told me, hey, remember that cookbook that we talked about a year ago? Like, I remember when I texted you and said that. Remember? Yes. And once again, it's a little... Yeah.
I was sitting in the car, and it was like literally 1 week before my husband had gotten a job offer in North Carolina. And like, obviously cookbooks were the last thing on my mind. I got this text from Cynthia. Hey, you remember that cookbook? Should we go do it this year? I was like, are we going to do that? So I had to give her a call and explain the situation, because I hadn't even told her yet that we were moving. But that was, I think, like you had that little voice in your head. It was a similar thing for me. Only for me, there was a lot of voices going on at the same time, trying to figure out, okay, what's realistic? What can I do? We're going to make this huge life change, this big shift. Can I make this happen? Is this smart? Should I say yes to this, or should I? Because it's, but at that point it was, it was the beginnings of a dream. It was something that I was really inspired to do. But it's kind of crazy when you're moving to the other side of a very large country.
Yes. So, I don't think it took a lot of convincing, because I think we got us on a Zoom call. Yeah. And in spite of your crazy life change at that moment, once again, like we've had all these challenges, the pandemic, the move, and all the things that you probably learned through the podcast, all the little challenges, and how we came to overcome every single one of them. And, that's the journey that we talk about here. It's being a true journey. So anyways, I remember she has so many weeks before she moved. And she had a little bit of gaps in between, I guess. You had like some friends watch over your kids, or like Yela, your husband, went to North Carolina and it's like, I'm home alone, come over. In spite of pandemic, we just like, okay, we're going to surrender to the situation, and we're just going to go into each other's house, and we're going to do this and bake and do the thing. And I remember one of the times we met, because we basically said we had photographed some of the pastry during that first photo shoot. But there were so many others that we either hadn't covered or we needed new versions of for X or Y reasons. So this whole process, when you go into photographing a cookbook, you start, getting to know about angles, and you need, do we need every photo in a vertical, or do we want it horizontal? Do we need the negative space? Are we going to include those little texts on the negative space? I remember going through your house, and that's when I found your collection of cookbooks. And then we pulled out some for inspiration. And I also remember some of them I looked at, and it's like, hey, the pictures that I took of you, like of that pastry on that brownie shoot, I think they're pretty good. Like, I want to say they're better than these. I remember thinking that. And then that was comforting for me to know that even though there were people that went through the process and published a cookbook, that I had the level of my knowledge of photography was at a level and a point where I could also deliver something that was as good, better, or, extraordinary, because I think some of them are. So
I remember looking at those cookbooks and saying, these are nice pictures. And you're like, they're all taken with artificial light. None of these are taken with natural light. I was like, okay. But I think the results in the cookbook speak for themselves, right? With that power is of the natural light that a lot of other, I understand why they don't do it, right? Because natural light it's changeable, it's fickle, it's not the same all the time. It's a lot more challenging to shoot in than an artificial light bulb that is always exactly the same.
Yes, control environments are certainly. Right. If you're doing this on a regular basis and over and over and over for, say, a restaurant, I can, and you need consistency through your images. I can see why people use artificial light, and it's certainly a skill that you need to develop as a food photographer. However, it's important. It was very important to me to keep my voice as the photographer that I am. So I just translated that into pastry, and the results were great. So I'm very happy to what we came up with. So then we have those two photo shoots where you.
Hey, wait a minute! You forgot an important step.
Oh, what was that?
Because we actually had to know what we were going to photo shoot, right? What we were going to photograph. Because you said, okay, let's go make a cookbook. That meant that we actually had to have content for the cookbook and know which pastries needed to go in there and what the structure was going to be and the theme and all that kind of stuff. And that's like the space of, 2-3 weeks to figure out what it is that we wanted to put in there. So fortunately for me, I think in hindsight, it was nice that the way that I'd set up my business and the story that I had for myself on my website and the story that I told people as I was trying to sell my pastries sort of made sense, right? It was all, as I was saying earlier, it's all about the Northern European way of taking a break and like giving yourself some peace and quiet and time to socialize with people, or just to enjoy the situation, or enjoy your pastry, enjoy your coffee, enjoy your tea. That storyline was there, and that gave me sort of a starting point for, okay, what are we actually going to put in this book, right? It's the book going to be vertical or horizontal in terms of photography we're going to put in there? What are we going to have? Are we going to have a chapter about cookies? Is there going to be a chapter about cakes? Is it going to be a book about, Christmas pastries? Like what is it that we're going to do here? So that was a bit of a challenge as well, which I think you kind of missed, Cynthia.
Yes.
We had to do all that in those weeks as well. And then I had to bake all the stuff so we could take photos of it. So that I think in hindsight, it was very rushed. It was definitely not ideal. But sometimes life puts you in that situation and you make do. And I hadn't even told my husband, Yella, that I was doing this. He was off in North Carolina signing his contract for his new job, and I was at home, and he had no idea that I was baking up a storm and I don't know how many pastries I created that week, but all my friends and neighbors were very happy to eat some of the pastries.
Yes,
it was a challenge, and it was fun.
Yes, it was fun, but I think, it's once again through this journey we have not only been faced with challenges that we had to overcome, but also almost through every single step of the way, working with you has showed me, what an incredible just designer you are, thinker, creative, baker, person, and all of the above. Like it's been so, and then it's almost, I get to get inspired by you. I get to admire you the more and more and more I work with you. It's been, one of the best thing about creating this cookbook has been really working with you, because I don't think the chemistry, the push that we give each other is that easily to be found with somebody else. And so I just want to put that out there. The fact that you push through, having to deal with a move, you having 2 small children because they were little, going through the pandemic, not having your husband there, having the vision really, because that came from you to have the direction of how this book was going to be, what was going to flow, and then bake for me to show up and photo shoot that, those 2 weekends. And I remember one of them was a Super Bowl weekend, and everybody was watching the Super Bowl at home, and we were just like busting our asses, like going up and down the stairs in your home, like looking for chasing the light. Like I was literally chasing the light inside your house. Like, what is the room? And I remember, like, if it's a bathroom, like, wherever the light is, that's where we're going to be photographing, because that's what it is about. Moving the furniture, moving the things. So it's been an incredible journey, really. And I remember also that day we went outside and we experienced fika. We had, we were tired. And I think you made some tea, and then we had a pastry, and then we had that chat in your garden that day. Was a spring day, and we was like, hey, this is what fika. We need to tell our readers also what this experience is about. Just taking the time to just be and enjoy each other, and that's
I think
another beautiful thing.
A little extra explanation for people who have never heard of fika before. So fika is a Swedish term, and it's really part of Swedish culture. People take several sort of fika breaks, coffee breaks, tea breaks throughout the day, where they really sit down and relax and take a moment out of their busy workday or their busy family life or whatever, just to enjoy this cup of coffee or enjoy this pastry that they're having with their coffee. There's always a pastry with it, whether it's a cinnamon bun or a little cupcake or whatever, a cookie. In Sweden, people even have, like, if you go to an office, there is a specific fika space, right? Place where people go. It's not weird unlike the American culture where you're encouraged to keep working and working and working. If you have lunch at your desk, then you're doing a good job. There, it's really encouraged to take a moment and like socialize with your colleagues and chat about the weekend, or even just take some time for yourself and take a break and let your brain rest. And that's seen as an improvement to productivity if people take the time to do that. And I personally agree with that. But even though I mean, both of us, we know about fika, we appreciate the concept of it. And in Northern Europe, it's not just in Sweden. I think the Swedes probably take it in the most extreme of all the Northern European countries that at least feature in the book. But they do similar things in the Netherlands, in Germany, in other Scandinavian countries, in Britain. That moment where you enjoy your coffee or socialize with your friends, that's a much bigger thing than it is in the United States, where people go to Starbucks and get their coffee and then drink it as they're walking to their next destination. And it was kind of fun to play around with that as well.
Yes, it's interesting you say that, because, I come from Panama, and growing up, like, I remember drinking coffee since I was a little, like, baby. Like, they would dip bread, and I just had coffee all my life, and there's nothing wrong with it, really. I turned out fine. But I remember
you're a little short, Cynthia. Imagine how tall you would have been if you hadn't been drinking coffee.
Average people. So it's interesting that, growing up in Panama, I did have a moment with my family where I just have, you sit down in the living room and you just have coffee with breakfast and you enjoy your present that time. Then I got married. I moved to Toronto, and then I was introduced to the rush. You drive through Tim Hortons and grab your coffee and your pastry and you go for the day. And the North American ways of rush. Then I go and move to the Netherlands. And then I remember sitting outside a cafe, and I was amazed that I wasn't being rushed to be out. Like here, the turnaround of the tables is so important. There, it's like, you pay €2, you have a coffee, and it's just like people watch for hours. And that's a totally acceptable way of living, or just meeting with a friend. I remember a friend of mine that lived in Utrecht, I think that's the pronunciation. Yeah, we just had like a little pastry by a canal, and we chatted for hours. She lived she visited Panama, and we had friends in common, and that was it. And that was simple being present. I took a train to that city just to have coffee and a pastry with her for 3 hours, and then I went back home to The Hague. So it's interesting. And then back here to the rush,
I miss that, just sitting out in the shopping street and having I don't drink coffee, but your cup of tea. And your pastry. I ate plenty of pastries. That's not a problem. That's something we really don't have in the United States, and I think that's kind of too bad. So anyway, back to where we were in our timeline. We took some time. We took some time to practice some fika of our own, basically, while we were working on all this crazy baking and photographing, and this big tight deadline to get everything done. To really sit together and enjoy each other's company and enjoy the process. And enjoy the pastries, because we had a lot of them.
We had a lot, and then while she was moving, we also, this started to snowball at that point. And I want to say that was the start of, I guess it was a spring of 2021. You have moved to North Carolina, and we started meeting. I want to say every 2 weeks or once a month, and I interviewed some people that had self-published cookbooks. We started doing research. How is this going to cost? Do we have to print 1,000 books? Do we have to pay them out of pocket? And I think that's when, while working at Nokia a couple of years earlier, I went to Ottawa, and there was a speaker there. And he talked to us about, generational differences, how the importance of interacting with and understanding really people from different generations in your workplace as clients. And, he had a system like, what defines a baby boomer, what defines a Gen Xer, what is a millennial, what are the trends, the community, and all of these. At the end of that speech, I remember, he was a speaker for a whole day. I remember he said that he had published over 100 books at the time, and the ways of Amazon had developed this incredible logistics system in which you don't need to prepay for your books to be printed to have them sold. And I remember at the end of that speech he said, like, if you are ever going to publish a book, this is my email and this is my phone number. Like, I remember clearly when that happened. And then while we were going through this whole experience, that's when I said to Joanna, like, hey, let me reach out to this person. And, I emailed him, and he has become our little angel guide, and most importantly, or the biggest mentor that we've had for this book. So that goes to say that even though, yes, we've been through the journey, we're creating, it's our work, the importance of having a mentor in your life, in anything you do, having somebody that can guide the way, somebody that is experienced, somebody that is willing to take you under their wings to push you and to guide you in how to develop a creative process. I think it's extremely important, and people don't talk about that enough. So, so this person, Stephen Shepard, who we're gonna have as a guest in our podcast very soon, because he's also a podcaster and knows a lot about that, and he has showed us really the way and gave us very key suggestion on how to go about the book, especially the user experience. How to make the book interactive, and how that has been so unique from any other books that we've seen out there in the market. So excited to share. Maybe in another, we can have a whole nother podcast on that.
Yep.
So yeah,
speaking with Stephen was incredibly inspiring, and also, I mean, my background is in design. I've been working through this whole process as well as a consultant, customer experience consultant. But just having somebody to help also put the act of writing a book into the context of design and user experience, I think that was really helpful for me, just because Stephen spoke those two languages and was able to make that connection in my brain. I think that's been really beneficial and inspiring as well, just for me to realize, okay, it's not just designing the layout of your book, but the whole idea, the whole concept behind your book, and how you're going to bring it to people and how people are going to use it and how people are going to understand it. It's also design, which was exciting for me because it gave me new avenues to use the skill set that I have, my professional skill set, also within this context. So I think, as Cynthia said, having a mentor and just opening your eyes to new ideas, or having inspiring conversations, and really just getting the energy of sort of a new way of looking at something that you hadn't already considered was invaluable. I don't know how we would have gotten to where we are now without his help.
Yes. And also the fact that he's a photographer and he looked at my pictures and he said, like, you've got something really good here, Cynthia, was also reassuring to, understand and get rid of that imposter syndrome. Shall we talk about the imposter syndrome?
Yes, we should. We should talk about imposter syndrome. I think it's one of those terms that people throw around a lot. And you're like, yeah, I get that. But it's not, I think, until you try and do something like this, where you're really pushing yourself and trying something really new that you've never done before, or and also looking at other people, or, for example, my cookbook collection and cookbooks that I really admire, and putting myself in that same line of people, of experts, basically, is difficult. Like, just imagining our cookbook being in my cookbook shelf or on the bookshelf in the store is weird. It's kind of disconcerting, right?
Yeah.
Because I never really pictured myself being able to do that, and I think you had a similar experience. And it's something that I still struggle with now, because I will get to that later. But we're getting pretty close to completing the book now and being ready to actually click that publish button. And I still sometimes have to think, okay, is anybody ever going to buy this book? Fortunately, Cynthia is very good at getting me enthusiastic and sort of setting the scene, and this is what it's going to be like. So that's helping me get over that imposter syndrome a little bit. But it's hard. It really is, and it can be really discouraging if you can't get over that thought that, you know what, I'm not sure I'm as good as all these other people. It's like, why would I be able to do this? I'm not trained to do this. This isn't my job. This isn't. People do this professionally. Why should I be able to do this? That's hard, and can be really demotivating if you're not careful.
Yes. My biggest struggle with the imposter syndrome, I believe, came about when you pushed me really to create a photography chapter for the book. Because it's not only, you're designing this piece, you have the beautiful subjects which you baked, and we have this beautifully designed cookbook that now, is interactive. So we have, we're creating all this content to make it interactive. And then we decided, hey, how about, and I remember doing research, because to this day, I have not seen any single photo book out there in the market that shows you how to take pictures of the food that is inside, and I am personally somebody that goes to a grocery store and grab a food magazine or go and get a cookbook. And I'll be honest, sometimes I just get them because they're so beautiful. It's like, I want to cook that. That's my motivation, like how beautiful that picture is. And I think that's true for a lot of people. So, I think that's one of the things that took me the longest, just creating that photography chapter. It's like, I'm not a writer. Am I really good enough to actually explain to people how to photograph food when I've never trained as a food photographer? How am I going to go about creating this chapter? So I remember it took me months, but I think what took me months to get over that, what it was actually the getting over the imposter syndrome. Because once I told myself, I'm good enough to create this chapter, to write it, then I was able to do it. But I had to overcome that in my mind first. I think that's important to say. And once I got over that, I work on my mindset. That's okay, fine. And then I drew a map. It's like, this is how it's gonna go about. So and
it's a gradual process too.
For sure. And I'm sure there are many things that we're still going through, like you said, and we like getting a podcast. Are we podcasters? Now I guess we can say that we are. Yeah. But it's a process. You need to like teach yourself and like get the equipment and go about how you're going to be doing it and having the conversation and make sure that it doesn't go over an hour, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and it's interesting to
I had the same thing during that period, I think, with like writing the recipes. Obviously, I developed these recipes myself from my bakery, and a lot of them came from my childhood and my youth, and things that I'd researched and experimented with, and I like my pastry, so that wasn't a problem. But I think once we started involving other people, where we were actually asking people to do things for us, so in this particular case, the recipe testers, was a really important step for me as well, because at that point I have to have something ready that was presentable for other people, and that they couldn't just say, oh, that looks great, wonderful, it's so great that you're doing this, and then that was it. They actually had to go and test it and cook the recipe and try it and give me feedback, and they did it because I asked them to, right? Because they thought it was fun and exciting, and they were willing to give feedback. And I think that was, for me, a really important step, being ready to ask people, like some of them that are close to are my family members, but also people like one of my recipe testers is somebody I've never met before, who just through my social media said, hey, I'd be willing to do that, which is wonderful. But I think that was really important. And I also received from some people, some pretty serious like feedback. I wouldn't say negative feedback, but constructive feedback, which also is hard when it's your baby. But no, I think I really appreciated people taking the time to cook these recipes and to share with me what went well and what didn't go well. And again, as a designer, to understand how usable my recipes are, how well they actually work for somebody who isn't me. Yes. But yeah, that was an important step to get over that imposter syndrome, to sort of start seeing myself as somebody who is able to create recipes that other people would want to bake. And there was a few of my recipe testers who said, oh, I love this recipe. This is like, I'm never going to bake my cinnamon buns in any other way again. These are the best cinnamon buns I've ever had. Or other people that said like, hey, I love this cookie recipe. It's super simple. And this is going to be my go-to recipe when I just feel like having something sweet and I can just grab all the stuff from my pantry. So those are those things are nice to hear as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that constructive feedback is very important in the growth that you have as an artist or creative, period.
Absolutely.
Recipe testers or portfolios review for me is just so incredibly helpful, really. How can you grow from what you have? It's very important. Yeah. So I think, going back through our timeline, and not to make this too long, I think we can say that I remember taking a couple of days off from work, and I got myself on a plane and went all the way to North Carolina because we had so many different, I think we had different intentions. We had the fact that there were some pastry and items on the book that we hadn't photographed yet. At that point, we had technically 3 photo shoots already, so we needed a 4th. And then we also decided to start shooting the content for the QR codes, so the interactive process of the book. So, behind the scene videos of how to do some of the pastry, or temper the chocolate, or I remember noting the cinnamons and creating that specifically, the how-to content. And besides that, we also decided to hire a photographer to do our own branding, because it was very important, me as a branding photographer myself, to be in the pictures, because we had to market us. And so we hired a photographer. And I remember I took an overnight, like a red-eye flight to pick me up from the airport. I took a shower I want to say it was a Friday. And we busted our little butts all weekend long. We worked so hard. I was tired. Like, I didn't sleep on the plane. And we just went one thing after the other, one thing after the other. We went to bed, woke up the next morning, and kept pushing through that. We did go out for dinner that night, which was really nice, because we needed that time also to just be with ourselves. And, thank you to your family to welcome me in your home, your new beautiful home in North Carolina. I got to see where you live.
Yes, that was after the second move. That happened as well. We had 2 moves in the middle of our cookbook creation process.
That's right. So because you were in a temporary residence before you went into your home. So so that was right. And what was most iconic to me, or one of the things that I remember most from that weekend and that photo shoot really was when the photographer Joy Knight from North Carolina, she asked us, like, so who's the type A or type B? Like, I forget how she said it. Who's the chill one? And she's like, and it's something that defines her personality so well, but also makes us, I think, click, because it develops chemistry between us. And so she's like, Joanna's type A and I'm the chill one, or I forget, or like. So
I had our photo shoots planned to the minute. I think first we're going to shoot these chocolate pies, then we're going to shoot these cinnamon buns, then I'm going to make this dough, and we're going to bake this in between. It's got to be done 30 minutes later. So it was literally, I don't know what you thought of me when I came with that schedule. This is what we're going to be doing, but we got it done.
It's great, yeah. I think I needed that tightness. Like, I needed that container to have what's next, and you know that flow, because you basically design a flow. Like, you design everything about your life, I think, about how you go. And I think that was a real
type A.
No, I think it's great. I mean, but part of the reason I think we work so great with each other is because we complement each other. Because so I'm not that. So I help you loosen up from that, but you also help me be more organized, or be more, on top of things. And I think that's great for both of us in everything that we do. I think that's great. So let's go over, we had a photo shoot, great photos. You've probably seen a lot of them on our website, joythecookbook.com at this moment, or Facebook or Instagram account at joythecookbook. And so important. I'm actually, we have a social media manager right now, and she's like, guys, we need more pictures, but we're so far away now. So we have to come up with creative ways on how we deliver and continue producing content for you guys, so you understand the background of why we're doing this cookbook.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
Yes, I think after all this journey, we can come to, the year 2022, where we are now. We're coming to the end of the year 2022, and we have both gone through a little bit of a delay. So we had the snowball effect. She moved, created. I went to North Carolina, and things were moving, and we decided about the QR codes, and everything was moving. We had this huge momentum that then later on got stalled towards the end of 2021, beginning of 2022. And we really wanted to hit the publish button this year. And it was both our intentions, but then once again, life gets on the way. a new challenge, a different challenge for both of us independently. But yet goes to say how incredibly we manage to push through this creative process in spite of those challenges. So towards the beginning of 2022, then I went myself through a huge struggle, emotional struggle. I was working full time in a supply chain role for tech, which meant that with the supply chain constraints and the pandemic, and you can look at this in this following way. Say you're going to buy a refrigerator, right? In the past, you got the parts, you got some bolts, and you got some with so much time to build your refrigerator. During the after the pandemic, the supply chain constraint created such shortages that we had to buy every single part months in advance, and we have to deal with forecasts. And it was a very stressful time with work itself. I remember I started losing my hair like crazy. I was so stressed. I would cry, not only for that, but also because inside me, my little voice that I'm going to talk about again for the first time on this podcast wanted out that so badly. And I wanted to quit my job so much. But then I was, having a steady income that provided for my family, my mortgage, sustaining my living in Silicon Valley. And I had this inner voice inside of me that just wanted to break from that. I wanted to be a full-time entrepreneur. I wanted to be a creative full-time. I wanted to photograph food and people and look for ways to break through that, my 9 to 5 and my steady income and my safety. Yeah. And it was a really stressful, emotional time. I remember when I decided to quit my job, I cried for 2 weeks straight. Because I was so fearful. So to this day, I tell people this is probably one of the most courageous things that I've ever done in my life. Give my notice and just do it. And I jumped from the cliff of the unknown to be what my heart really desired to be. And I remember during that time at the beginning, the first 6 months of 2022, I would show up to the meetings because we continue meeting. We really haven't missed meetings. We just kept pushing through it. And there were times when I showed up and I said, out of all the to-dos, I didn't get to do anything today, Joanna. And you so gracefully, we went on to talk about our personal life. And I think we need to celebrate ourselves for that as well, because you supported me through this process. And then the second half of the year, then I got into a rhythm. I had quit. I had the time. And then something else arose for you.
Yep. So around, was it July of this year? I was diagnosed with lymphoma. So cancer, that's not anything that anybody ever wants to be diagnosed with. Fortunately for me, it was one that's treatable, or is one that's treatable. But it's still a process, right? It's like being treated for cancer, going through chemotherapy, that whole emotional journey that you go through as you're dealing with being sick, first of all, and dealing with the impact that it has on your family and your life and your priorities and what you want to do with yourself. It's a lot. So just as Cynthia had a big challenge at the beginning of the year, mine came towards the second half. So we tag teamed it, which was less than ideal. But again, just like Cynthia, for me, it was important to have something sort of to hold on to that was not just about being sick and then trying to keep it together to keep your family running, but to have something creative in the background, something that you're like a big project that you're working towards, something that you find interesting and that's energizing and that's exciting for you. So I had, I'm sure, just as many meetings as Cynthia did at the beginning of the year where I would say, sorry, I haven't been able to do anything this week. I've just been in bed or doing my treatment or just recovering from everything that's going on with my body. So yeah, again, giving each other grace to go through processes like that in your life, whatever caused them, whether it's a physical thing or a psychological thing or whatever it is, right? I think that's part of being collaborators. It's part of being creative partners. It's also part of being friends. And I think I'm really, really thankful that throughout this process that we started off as friends, that we're still friends. That could have gone very different. It could have been like 6 months later, like, seriously, Cynthia, again? I'm done. But no, we still like each other. We still love each other. It's going well. And we will get the book done eventually.
Yes. So, yeah. With that said, yeah, the latest on the book, you guys, is that we decided not to kill ourselves because we really wanted to make it available for the holiday season. Mm-hmm. But, as advised by our mentor, Stephen, last time we met up with him, he's like, you guys, just push it. Don't kill yourself. Enjoy your holidays. Mm-hmm. Joanna still have to go to radiotherapy in the next few weeks. So with that said, even though the book is, technically ready to be published at this moment, we decided to have official release on February 14, 2023. And in the meantime, we're going to be both creating content for you to understand our journey, for you to hear the stories of how we came about this beautiful cookbook that literally has been our baby. Like, we had to name it. We had to buy a little cover for it, or think of what is it gonna look like. And it's been such a beautiful, beautiful journey, and I'm so excited that is finally. I can't wait to have it in my hands. Basically, I do a lot of visualization exercises. I close my eyes and I just feel it. And in my hands already. And I know that is going to be very, very soon. So that's the newest. We have, like I said before, our website that we managed to publish this year. And we incentivize all of you listeners to join our newsletter, which is going to be the latest and greatest. It's going to have the latest and greatest information on the book, when it's going to be released. We're going to be giving away some recipes and photography tips. So I think we should close with, letting our listeners know what to expect from both of us in the next few weeks.
Yep. So yes, definitely. We're going to continue with these podcasts. I hope that you enjoyed listening to this one. We'll be doing loads more because I think we have lots more to share. And we're really working hard to make this exciting and just as fun for you as it is for us, working towards the actual publication of the book. And I'm already thinking about the next one. So I already have a plan for what's going to be in there. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, though. Yeah. But yeah, and we've got so many ideas for the future, but we'll get into that, I think, in a different podcast of what we could be, how we can develop this further as we go on in our journey of creative collaboration and creating these cookbooks. But in any case, as I said before, I'm so thankful that we've been going through this journey. I've learned so much from it. I appreciate our friendship. I appreciate all the things that have come from working together and pushing ourselves to try something new and to put ourselves out there.
Yes. We should be proud of ourselves, that's for sure. So I think with this, we close our first podcast, The Inception of Joy, how the cookbook idea came about in our minds. So excited. We're going to be recording new podcasts. So stay tuned for the next one. And I'll see you guys later.
All right. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.